Hi DIYers, today we're going to make Minecraft curtains. You will need some white, red, and black fabric, red and white thread, your sewing machine, tape measure, scissors, and if you have it, a cutting mat and a rotary cutter. This is what the plan is that we're going for a TNT box.
So however big your window is how you're going to do this. The measurements is pretty much the same. So what I mean by that is my window is 54 by 56. So I need to have at least 54 between these two panels here. So what I'm going to do is take my calculator and I'm going to add 54. I'm going to divide that by 2 to get how wide each panel absolutely has to be, which is 27. And then I'm going to add 1 inch, 2 inch seam allowance on this side, 1 inch, 2 inch seam allowance on that side, and the same thing with this. So that equals 31. So when I cut my red, it's going to be from here to here is going to be 31 inches. And same thing from here to here is going to be 31 inches because we've got 2 panels to cover the entire 54 and then the seam allowance on each side. Okay. Now, how long I make it, in my case, is 56 is the window height. And I need to divide it by 3, 1, 2, 3 different pieces. So 56 divided by 3 is roughly 19. It's a little less, 18.6. And then what we do is, again, we add 1, 2 inches here, 1, 2 inches here. This is only going to be a seam allowance of 5/8, and this is only going to be a seam allowance of 5/8. So I'm going to add 2 and 5/8 plus 2 and 5/8 equals 21 and 5/8. I might just round that to 22 because it makes my life easy. So this panel here is going to be 22. This panel here is going to be 22, and 5/8 and 5/8. Just to make my life easy, I'm just going to roll it as 1.5. So 19 plus 1.5, or 1.5, is 20.5. So 20.5 inches. Okay, so I'm going to just create a straight line. Our selvage is going to be straight. I've got the extra material over on a chair here so it doesn't pull it off the table, because we don't want it weighting it down. So here's our selvage line right across the front here. It's the part where it's woven. I'm going to line that up with the straight line of my ruler. And I'm just going to go ahead with my rotary cutter and cut that. We know we have our straight line. What we're going to do is measure.
So now I'm measuring from 22 inches from the edge with just a pen. I will be making these markings and then I'll match them all up and mark them all at once. My apologies for it being off the screen. I didn't realize that my phone wasn't set up properly. And then what you'll do after you have your straight line is you will use your rotary cutter to cut it all out, or your scissors. After you're done your width of 22, you're going to cut out your length of 31 inches. You're going to do that 4 times because you've got your 4 different red ones. And then it's time to cut out your white material.
31. So first I'm going to make sure my top edge is square, and then I'm going to measure 20.5 down, and then I'm going to measure 31 wide. Okay, so this is the TNT for the middle of the curtains. I've got some scrap black fabric, which is actually a knit, which means it stretches. So what I've done is I've put some fusible interfacing on the back so it doesn't stretch. I've got my cutout. This is my first tee. I looked online just to make sure how many squares were, and it turns out it's not 3x4 or 3x3, it's 4x4. So I've got 1, 2, 3 squares, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are 2x2. And so in order to cut out my tee, I'm going to try and conserve fabric by putting another one down here. And then I will do my end on a completely different separate piece of fabric, but I thought I'd just show you how I go about doing this. So I'm gonna put this, it's a straight edge on the bottom there. There we go. And tuck this next to this one. So this cut will serve for this one and this piece as well. There we go. So I've got my rotary cutter.
When you're cutting the pieces in between each other, so the pieces that butt up against each other, you want to leave about 1/8 of an inch, just because you don't want to accidentally cut it into the next piece using your rotary cutter. You will, at the end, come back with scissors and cut those last little bits to free each piece.
Now I take my scissors and I just trim in those corners. So the first one I'll do is this one here. Laying it as flat as possible. Go in there. Just turn it. And it's got one thread left. There we go. Okay, so this has been ironed on. And now I've got my one end piece and my other one right here.
So you're going to cut out your end piece the same way you did with your T piece. Line up your pieces together, and when you're making the cuts in between each of the pieces, make sure to leave at least 1/8 of an inch of a bumper, just so you don't accidentally cut into the other side of the piece. Then you'll come in with your scissors afterward and go ahead and cut the pieces free from each other. Once you have your letters cut out, fold your white fabric in half and put a pin in either end so you know exactly where the half point of your fabric is. Then you want to open it up again and put your ruler at either end of those pins. Find the middle of the fabric due to your measurements and put a pin there. Now you're going to put either half of your N on top of the pin. Once you have located where you would like your end to be, use the ruler to space out how far apart you want your T to be. Once you have your T in place, pin them also. Next step is to sew them on.
This is my sewing machine. It was my Nana's. So for this particular application, I've got it on 1.5 stitch length, and I've got it on in between 3 and 4 for my width. And I've got my tension at a tighter tension at 1, and I've actually tightened the bobbin underneath, right between this fabric and this fabric. And I'm going to do a few stitches, and then I'm going to back it up to lock it in, and then forward again. And I'm letting my machine drag it through. I'm just making sure that it doesn't lift off too much. Take out my pin. We don't want to hit our pin with the machine or else we'll possibly break our needle. And come to the end. And once we get to the end, we just do a few stitches. Once we get to the end, I'm putting my needle on the outside. So on the white side, I lift my presser foot. I turn my whole work 90 degrees. Put my presser foot down. Okay, so we've sewn all our TNT on. Now we've got to put a piece of red at the top and a piece of red at the bottom. So what we're going to do is put the two right sides of the fabric together. This is a right side, that's the wrong side, it's like coarser. So we're going to put this together with the TNT. Here we go. And we're going to pin these two together.
Before you sew your two pieces of fabric together, try it out on a piece of sample fabric first, because these two are pieces of cotton which are different than the TNT, which was a knit, and the piece of cotton. So you may have to adjust the tension on your machine.
What I'm going to do is a straight stitch from here all the way across. So I've got that one side pinned. So when it's sewn, it will look like that. And now I need my other piece on the other side. You can see the edge of my fabric really frays. So I've done just a zigzag stitch on the edge to make it overlocking. Now I'm going to go iron the seams open, I'll be turning the seam to the darker color. So when I iron it, I'll be ironing this up like that. So when you look through and the sun's shining through your curtain, you won't see a line going across your white. Okay, so we're gonna do our side hem here. So we are doing it an inch and another inch because we allowed for 2 inches on each side. So I'm gonna take my little handy dandy ruler. I don't know if you can see. This little thing slides back and forth, and I've got it set down to 1 inch. So the easiest way for me to do this is to slide it under, match the top of the fabric to this little ticky thing, hold it there, and press. And move along to the ticky thing, and press. I'm gonna flip it over again because we gave ourselves a 2 inch allowance. So there we go, that's 2 inches. So once this is turned under 1, we'll turn it under again and press. And then we'll go ahead, and after we press it that time, we're going to pin it, and then we will sew it along the edge there. So I just folded them in half. I'm gonna sew like this, turn it inside out, press it again, fold it in half, and then I'm just going to slide these under the edge once this is turned under, like that, and back again. So when you sew like this,
If you're making a casement for your top, you will need to flip over your hem. It may be less than 1 inch if you need more room for your casement. Flip your casement over your rod, mark where the fold would be with your pins, and then iron along the fold where the pins are. You're going to straight stitch across the lower hem, and then you will have a pocket where your rod can be put through. So these are the curtains all hung up and finished, and they look pretty great.